Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an author and a consultant from Ohio, USA, Mr. Jake Jacobs. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you. Jake is the founder of Jake Jacobs Consulting. He has authored and co-authored 7 books, and clearly he is very passionate about writing. So Jake, today we'll talk about your consulting and we'll talk about your books. Let's start with Jake Jacobs Consulting. Tell me about this venture and the areas that you normally work in.
Sure. I work primarily with what I describe as people leading change work in organizations who are frustrated that the results that they're achieving are too slow, too hard, or too often disappointing because they don't achieve the goals that they set out to achieve. So my work cuts across all kinds of industries. I've worked in pharmaceuticals, I've worked in finance, I've worked in manufacturing, I've worked in service industries and retail, and also all kinds of organizations in terms of communities and governments and corporations around the world.
Wonderful. And you say that you have worked with over 210,000 people in 61 industries. Now, that's a huge number of people. How do you manage such amazing diversity of skill sets?
Sure. Well, what I learned growing up early in my career it came to be known as large group interventions. And large group interventions are when you bring together, well, as few as 100 or 200, but I've worked with 1,000 people on the floor of an arena for 3 days in a decision meeting when they decided on 10 things that they were going to take actions to save their business, and 9 months from saying that they would like to work together, they had tremendous results in terms of their financial results and also level of engagement that people have. So the large group interventions have exposed me to a lot of people at the same time. And then again, I'm not shy to say I'm doing this work for 35 years. So that adds up as well, Ash.
Okay. And what have been some of your challenges and some of your learnings as you've built such an amazing consulting organization?
Yeah, so I think that the first challenge has been finding the right clients. For my work around engaging people and creating their collective future, the clients that I work with are a very select crowd. They are people who are motivated and believe deeply in their hearts and souls that the best way to accomplish what they set out to accomplish is working through people and with people, not having people work for them. So the first challenge, I think, is finding the right clients and having those clients find you. I also think that one of the challenges that I've placed before myself my entire career, somebody once said to me that I have a relentless dissatisfaction with my current mode of practice. So whatever that I'm doing, I'm always looking for better and different ways to get the job done. And so learning and ongoing learning, people talk about lifelong learning. I am always reading some type of a book or having a conversation with some type of a colleague around things that I don't know yet. So I think the second major challenge has really been one I've placed for myself around my learning curve and making sure that it's a steep one so that I can better serve my clients and I can better serve their customers.
Wonderful. You know, you also say that your promise is to get from point A to point B faster, easier, better than you ever imagined. Help me understand this with some examples.
Sure. So, the faster, easier, better results is the subtitle for my new book called Leverage Change. And one example I can give you was working with TK Maxx, which is a retailer
Yeah.
in Europe. In Europe, ahead of competitions, ahead of other off-price retailers, they call it. And so we needed to establish this new way of working and very rapidly. So in less than a year, they had what they called their same store sales, which is in fact a key metric in the retail industry. Their retail sales had increased 10% year over year when we had finished their work in an economy in which their competitors had averaged less than 1% per year. That's one example. Another one I think is really important, especially given we've all been struggling with the last couple of years, was in New York City. This was back all the way into the early 90s. There was a pending pandemic around tuberculosis in New York City. And if they didn't get on top of this soon enough, they had multi-drug resistant strains, which meant that people were getting their regular medication and that strain would become immune to the antibiotics that they were being given. And so very rapidly, we needed to be able to stop this spread of tuberculosis in its tracks. And what we did again in less than a year was we got 5 city agencies to collaborate with each other to work together in ways they never had before and be able to establish common protocols so that the people who were ill were getting their medication regularly. And I'm proud to say that there's been an 85% year over year decline in the incidence of tuberculosis cases in the city of New York. Last year, Ash, the number was the lowest number since they started recording these figures in 1897. So there's a couple of stories, and there are many, many more, but really the question becomes, how do we take these levers or smart strategic actions that I've written about in my book, and how do we apply those in a wide variety of situations to be able to get those faster, easier, better results?
Fascinating. So Jake, now let's move to your books. Tell me a little bit about your books, and then we'll get into some more details about you as an author.
Sure. So there's 3 books that I've solo authored. The first one's called Real-Time Strategic Change. How to Involve an Entire Organization in Fast and Far-Reaching Change. This book described the approach and the model of these large group interventions that I mentioned earlier. The second book, we wanted to be sort of a back hip pocket book that managers and leaders could quickly pull out. And it's called You Don't Have to Do It Alone, How to Involve an Entire Organization in Fast and Far-Reaching Change. So this You Don't Have to Do It Alone is all about people getting things done through people. And so in this case, there are 5 steps that we outlined. Things like, how do you know what kind of involvement do you need? How do you invite people so that they'll want to be involved? How do you work with people so they'll want to stay involved? These kind of questions, which are very basic, we said we could write that for everything from a superintendent in a school system to a CEO of a Fortune 50 company. And then the latest book that I've written, Leverage Change, which is about the faster, easier, better results, is a distillation of what I think I've learned about organizations and change over the last 35 years. And just to give you an idea, one of the levers or actions that I recommend is called Think and Act as if the future were now. And what this says is that mostly what we think about at the future is something that will occur at a later point in time. And rather than seeing the future as something that we have to wait for it to unfold, what this lever says is that we need to get some image of what that future looks like, any image really, and be able to start thinking and acting as if that future that we're envisioning is happening right now. How do we change our behavior so that, in fact, we're not waiting for that future, but we're acting on it now? If you want a more participative culture, don't put it in as a vision for 3 years from now. Think about, what can I do this afternoon that's going to be more participative? Don't wait for those big plans to come home and be able to make big changes. Start making any change that you can immediately, and you'll find that all of your changes start happening.
Fascinating. So let me ask you a few philosophical questions with regard to writing. My first question to you, and this is for the many people who will listen to our conversation, are authors born or trained? And this is very appropriate for you because you've written 7 books.
Right. This is the nature and nurture question.
Yeah.
And I would say anybody who really wants to write a book that has a message that they want to share with the world is capable of doing so. Now, is that something? Well, I'm born with this interest in writing and sharing my message, and maybe to some extent true. Some people, I learn a lot through writing. So the writing teaches me as well as me teaching others. So from that standpoint, if you're interested in doing that in your career, then I suppose there's a bit of it that you're born with. But then I think really anybody can learn to write if they're passionate enough about it. And there's some level of dedication, some level really of forgiveness. I think it's a forgiveness for yourself. You don't have to worry about getting it right. In this book, I actually wrote the Leverage Change book in 4 months, and I wrote the Real-Time Strategic Change book in 16 months. So sometimes it'll take you longer to get that story out. But I found that I've been committed to this since I started. I wrote the very first article for a journal. I was 24 years old. So I've always loved the writing. And I would say to your listeners, about, then they need to get started and get started with forgiveness for themselves. They don't have to get it right the first time or the second time or even the third time. But what they need to do is put the time in and get better each time that they work on it.
Wonderful. And do you have a fixed schedule when you write, or is it whenever you feel like?
Yeah. So this last book, I took time off from my practice and I wrote, and I probably wrote from 9 until 4. And at 4 o'clock, I have a big black Labrador dog whose name is Theo. And he's used to going to a great big half-mile long field and running free in the afternoon. So he's actually in my home office, asleep now, 4 p.m. where I am yet. But when that clock rolls around, he comes up and he gives me a look and he starts to nudge me and he knows it's time to go.
Absolutely.
So I found that around 4 or 5 was a great for me to do some reflecting on the writing that I'd done that day and what I wanted to accomplish the next day. So I guess in that sense, I did have some routine to my writing, but I think for your listeners, it's really knowing when is it that you feel like it's a good time for you to sit down and put thoughts to paper or fingers to keyboard to be able to do the writing that works for you.
Very interesting. And do you as a writer face writer's block?
Well, this last book, Ash, I wrote 1 chapter, which was remarkable. My life partner, I told this to me, and she said to me, well, you're just writing what you know. So why is that special? And I thought, well, to write a chapter in 2 days is the definition of special. I find that if I stuck in some way in what I'm trying to write about, I reach out for help. So I reach out to colleagues, I reach out to clients, conversations about real work that they're doing in the real world. And that typically unhooks me. That gives me more ideas and more thoughts about what's going to matter to my readers, because these people, my clients, my colleagues, people that they represent are my readers. And so I want to these real conversations amidst the process has been a really helpful way for me to make sure that I'm writing for them instead of writing for me.
Very interesting. So, Jake, I have time for two more questions for you. My next question is, again, for a lot of young people, what makes a good story?
Great. I think an honest, authentic, and vulnerable one. So there are stories in the Leverage Change book. And these are all real stories with real people. And so I think that folks are drawn to the authenticity of the stories that I share. And there's sometimes for me, sometimes for the clients, but there's a realness to the story where people can relate to it. They can say, yes, in fact, I've had the issue. I've had a direct report that's been difficult for me to work with. And the question is, how can I help them help me better? And these are ones that everyday people wrestle with all the time. And so I think a good story has to be one that's relatable. It has to be one that people can see them and be recognizing that they've had similar issues. That's a story that I'm interested in listening to. Those are lessons that I'm interested in learning.
Very interesting. And my last question to you, Jake, and again, this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your amazing journey as a consultant, where you are actually working on faster, easier, better, and based on all your experience and of writing 7 books, what would you say are 3 lessons you think our viewers and listeners should take away from our conversation?
Great. So is a main message that's in all of the books. It's in all of my writing, which is, if you want effective, sustainable change in an organization, you must engage people in that organization in creating their collective future. This is not something that can be dictated. You can't tell people, it doesn't matter how passionate you are as a leader, you've got to draw circles that include people in creating that future. So that's number one. Number two, where you're passionate. I was very fortunate in my career, and I found what I wanted to do at a very young age. I was 21 years old for my first consulting at a bar that I attended at university. And so finding what you love to do, really for me, what makes for a good day at work. When I get up in the morning, I get to get on a podcast like yours and talk about what I'm passionate about. And the last thing is to practice. As you get started with the work that you're doing, I think this forgiveness factor is really important because this is about an ongoing journey of learning over time. And so by practicing my craft, there's in Blink, there's a story that Malcolm Gladwell talks about where he says that there's 10,000 hours that we have to devote to be able to become an expert in our world truth. I don't know whether 10,000 is the right number or not, but I know that you need to step back and really work at what it is that you're trying to get better at and do that every day and in every way, and ask people for help. I squeeze a fourth one in, which is ask people for help. That's what they're for, their colleagues or mentors or mentees that you can learn from others. And so being open to the possibility, but it is that else has to teach you, I'm going to squeeze in as a fourth one.
Wonderful, wonderful. Jake, on that note, and the 4 lessons you've just given to all our viewers and listeners, thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you for talking to me about your amazing journey as a consultant, where you talk about faster, easier, better. Thank you for talking to me about your books, and I can see your books behind you, Real-Time Strategic Change and Leverage Change. I can see them behind you. Thank you for speaking to me about what goes into making a good author and what goes into writing a good story, as well as your own schedule. Finally, thank you for speaking to me again, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much. It's been a delight to join you, and I think what you've created with your listeners and your podcast is something to be admired. So I consider it a great gift to join you in this journey.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.